Welcome back to the deep dive. If I sound a little cautious today, there's a pretty good reason for that. We are walking directly into a minefield.
That's one way to put it.
And I don't mean that well, okay, maybe a little metaphorically, but we're tackling a subject that is just surrounded by lawyers, by razor wire, and about, what, 70 years of incredibly intense history.
It is certainly a heavy hitter. Depending on which document in this massive stack in front of us you choose to believe, we're either about to discuss the only hope for saving humanity from insanity and, nuclear destruction.
Right, the salvation of mankind.
Or we're about to dissect a transnational criminal enterprise that masquerades as a religion to hoard cash and abuse its members.
There is almost no middle ground in the source material, is there? It is completely, utterly polarized. We are talking, of course, about Scientology.
We are. And, it's one of those topics where everyone thinks they know the story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You see the headlines. You picture Tom Cruise jumping on a couch. You picture John Travolta in a pilot's uniform. You hear all these rumors about aliens and volcanoes.
The sci-fi stuff.
Right. And the general consensus for the average person is usually just, it's that weird thing famous people do that costs a fortune.
And that's the caricature. It's the tabloid version. But our mission today, and why we have so many documents in front of us from so many different sources, is to go way, way past that.
We have to.
We need to look at the mechanics. How does a science fiction writer in the 1950s, a guy who was writing pulp stories for a penny a word, how does he pivot to creating a global theology?
And what is the actual technology they claim fixes the human mind? That's the core of it.
And then there's the big one. Why is this organization seemingly constantly at war with everyone?
Yeah.
The government, the internet, the entire psychiatric profession.
To understand that, I think we have to start with the concept of the two Scientologies.
The two Scientologies. Okay, break that down for us.
Well, looking at the sources, you have the Scientology that's presented to the public. This is the humanitarian organization, the one with the gleaming new buildings, the anti-drug campaigns, the celebrity endorsements.
The one you see on the Super Bowl ad.
Exactly. It presents itself as a modern, practical religion offering real tools for life. Communication courses, help with studying, that kind of thing.
Okay, so that's version one. And the second one?
The second one is the Scientology you find in court dockets, in FBI files, and in sworn affidavits from former high-ranking executives who were there for decades.
And that version is different.
It's described as a high control group, punitive, secretive, and incredibly, incredibly expensive. So our goal today isn't to take a side and say this is good or this is evil.
No, we're just unpacking the sources.
Our goal is to unpack all this source material to see how these two completely contradictory versions can possibly coexist.
So let's start at the very beginning. Because before there was a church and way before there was a controversy, there was just a man, L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron Hubbard, or LRH, as he's often referred to by his followers, born in 1911. By the 1930s and 40s, he was an incredibly prolific writer.
Yeah.
And unbelievably prolific.
He was a machine.
A machine. He wrote westerns, adventure stories, fantasy.
Yeah.
But he was specifically known for his science fiction.
And that background is so important to everything that follows, right? He was a world builder by trade.
Exactly. He was used to creating entire universes with their own rules, their own physics, their own histories. But in 1950, he shifts gears completely. He releases a book that just explodes onto the scene. Dianetics, the modern science of mental health.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but reading through the early history, Dianetics wasn't pitched as a religion at all, was it?
Not even a little bit. And that distinction is absolutely critical for the listener to understand. In 1950, Hubbard presented Dianetics as a mental health science. A science.
Okay, and the timing is key here too, right? This is post-World War II.
You have to remember the context. Psychology and psychiatry were still in a very rough state. Lobotomies were still happening. People were deeply traumatized from the war. And Hubbard comes along and offers what is essentially an engineering approach to the mind.
An engineering approach? I like that. It sounds so appealing. It's like saying, you aren't broken, you're not crazy, you just have a mechanical issue we can fix.
Precisely. The central thesis of Dianetics is that the human mind has a fundamental flaw. He divided the mind into two primary parts. You have the analytical mind, which he said is like a perfect computer. It's rational, it's calculating, it's flawless.
Okay, the good part.
And then you have the villain of the story, the reactive mind.
The reactive mind. Let's really unpack that. What is it doing to us?
Hubbard claimed the reactive mind is a kind of stimulus response mechanism that only kicks in when you are unconscious, or semi-unconscious, or in extreme pain.
So when the analytical mind is offline.
Exactly. And when it's on, it records everything that's happening around you. Not like a memory, but like a raw, painful recording. He called these recordings engrams.
An engram. Okay, so give us an analogy for that. Make it real for us.
Okay, imagine you're a child, and you get kicked by a horse. You're knocked unconscious. Your analytical mind, the perfect computer, shuts off. But your reactive mind is still recording everything. It records the physical pain of the kick, the sight of the horse, the smell of the manure in the barn, maybe someone shouting, "He's hurt."
Got it. It's all recorded in this one toxic file.
Exactly. And later on, years later, you're walking past a farm, you smell manure, or maybe you hear someone in a movie shout, "He's hurt." And suddenly, your reactive mind keys in that enneagram. You get a sudden headache. You feel a surge of anxiety. You have no idea why.
It's like a glitch in your hard drive, a corrupted file that just keeps playing in the background and messing everything up.
That's a great way to put it. And Hubbard said these engrams are the root cause of all human misery. Not just anxiety, but irrational behavior, psychosomatic illnesses, bad eyesight, asthma, arthritis. He blamed it all on engram.
Oh, so he was offering a single cause for everything.
It's a single cause. And Dianetics was the debugger. The therapy, which he called auditing, was designed to find these engrams and erase them.
And the ultimate goal of the therapy was to erase them all, to become clear.
Yes, a clear is a person who has no reactive mind left. It's been completely erased. And Hubbard promised that a clear would have a near-perfect IQ, a photographic memory, no illnesses.
Yeah.
They would be, for all intents and purposes, an optimized human being.
Which, let's be honest, is an absolutely incredible sales pitch. Here is a book, a therapy that will make you a superhuman.
And the public ate it up. Dianetics was a massive bestseller. Dianetics clubs sprang up all over America. People were literally auditing each other in their living rooms, reading from the book. But there was a major, major problem.
The scientists didn't like it?
They hated it, to put it mildly. The American Psychological Association, the medical establishment, they rejected it almost immediately as dangerous pseudoscience. They said there was absolutely no evidence for any of these claims about engrams or the reactive mind.
And then the business side of it started to fall apart too.
It crumbled. The Dianetics foundations went bankrupt. Hubbard actually lost the rights to the book Dianetics for a while in 1952. It was a complete disaster.
So let's pause right here. He's bankrupt. The scientific community is laughing at him. He's lost the rights to his own bestseller. This really feels like it should be the end of the story.
It does. Most people would pack it up, go back to writing Pulp Fiction, and call it a day.
But Hubbard pivots. And this is one of the most scrutinized, most critical moments in the entire history of this movement. This is the moment where we shift from science to religion.
This is the turning point.
I want to look at a specific document we have here. It's a letter from April 1953 that Hubbard wrote to Helen O'Brien, who was helping manage what was left of the organization.
This letter is often cited by critics as the smoking gun. In it, Hubbard is discussing how to structure their new organization in Phoenix. And he writes, quote, "We don't want a clinic. We want one in operation, but not in name. It is a problem of practical business. I await your reaction on the religion angle."
The religion angle. It sounds, frankly, it sounds like a business strategy, not a spiritual revelation.
Historians and critics argue that's exactly what it was. It was a pragmatic, almost cynical move. If you frame your organization as a clinic, you're subject to medical regulations, malpractice suits. You have to prove your claims.
Right. You're held to a scientific standard.
But if you frame it as a religion, you get First Amendment protection. You don't have to prove your therapy works in a lab because it's not therapy anymore. It's a spiritual ritual.
And taxes. We can't forget about taxes.
Exactly. So in late 1953, the first Church of Scientology is incorporated in New Jersey. And Hubbard was surprisingly open about this. Even later, in a 1962 lecture, he told his followers that the religious structure was, quote, entirely a matter for accountants and solicitors.
Wow, he was saying the quiet part out loud right there. But let's look at the name itself. Scientology. It still sounds scientific. It has science right in the name.
It's designed to. It's a very clever linguistic blend. You have the Latin word "seer," which means to know, and then the Greek word logos, meaning the study of. So Hubbard defined it as knowing about knowing.
Knowing about knowing. It's very meta.
It is, but by using that "iology" suffix, he was borrowing the prestige of science in the atomic age. It sounds like technology, like engineering. It appeals to a certain kind of person who might not be interested in faith or God, but is very interested in results and workability.
So now we have the vehicle, the church. It provides legal protection, but they need a new engine. They need a theology. Because Dianetics was all about the mind, but Scientology goes deeper. This is where we get introduced to the Thetan.
This is the core shift from Dianetics to Scientology. In Dianetics, you are a mind and a body. In Scientology, you learn that you are not your body, you are not your mind, you are not your name or your personality. You are an immortal spiritual being called a Thetan.
So I don't have a soul or a Thetan, I am a Thetan.
Exactly. You are the driver, the body is just the car. A meat body, as they sometimes call it in the texts. The doctrine teaches that the Thetan is immortal, has lived through countless past lives on this planet and others over trillions of years.
Trillions with a T.
Trillions. Hubbard's timeline for the universe is, let's say it's much, much older than what modern science suggests.
And the goal of Scientology, then, is to awaken this Thetan.
It's to rehabilitate the Thetan to its native godlike abilities. One of the key concepts introduced here is exteriorization. This is the ability of the Thetan to actually detach from the body and exist independently of it while still being able to control it.
So out-of-body experiences on demand.
That's the idea. And this all leads us to the central roadmap of the religion, which they call the bridge to total freedom.
I've seen this chart. It's huge. It looks like a giant periodic table or a really complex corporate flow chart.
It is massive, and it is a very rigid step-by-step process. You cannot skip steps. You start at the bottom as a pre-clear. You do auditing sessions to handle your earthly traumas and engrams and become clear. But in Scientology, unlike in Dianetics, becoming clear is just the halfway point.
Just the beginning, really. So what comes after clear?
Once you are clear, you attest to that state, and then you move on to the operating Thetan levels, or the OT levels.
Operating Thetan, that word operating implies function, action.
Right. An operating Thetan is defined as someone who can operate spiritually without being encumbered by matter, energy, space, or time. They can be at cause over these things.
So we're not just talking about being happy or having a good memory anymore.
It's a whole different ballgame. The promise is incredibly seductive. We aren't just talking about peace of mind. The source material says an OT is posited as having godlike power, the ability to create personal universes, total control over your environment.
But, and I feel like this is a very big but, getting across that bridge isn't like going to Sunday school. You have to pay.
You do. And this is one of the biggest points of contention and criticism. Scientology operates on a very strict doctrine of exchange. Hubbard taught that if you give something away for free, the recipient doesn't value it, and it can actually harm them spiritually. So, you must pay for auditing and training.
And we aren't talking about a collection plate being passed around on a Sunday.
No. We are talking about fixed prices for our courses and for intensives of auditing, which are 12.5-hour blocks, and the costs are steep.
How steep are we talking?
The source material from ex-members and journalists who have investigated this site estimates that traversing the entire bridge, going from the very bottom all the way to OT8, the highest level currently available, can cost anywhere from $400,000 to over $559,000 adjusted for inflation.
$500,000 for spiritual freedom.
And that's a conservative estimate. That assumes you move through the levels without any trouble. If your auditor finds you have a dirty needle on the e-meter, meaning you have more issues to handle, you have to pay for more hours to fix it.
Okay, you mentioned the e-meter. Let's pause on that. Because if you walk past a church of Scientology, you might see people in the window at a desk holding two metal cans connected to a meter. What is happening there?
That is the electropsychometer, or e-meter. It's basically a simple device that measures galvanic skin response. It passes a tiny electrical current through the body and measures changes in resistance.
So the theory is what? That your thoughts have electrical properties.
The theory is that when you are asked a question about a past trauma, the thought itself carries mass, or a kind of spiritual charge. That charge changes the electrical resistance in your body, and the needle on the meter moves. A smooth floating needle means no charge. A sticky or falling needle means you've hit on something.
So it's a lie detector. Or a trauma detector.
Scientologists would say it's a spiritual tool for the auditor to locate areas of distress with precision. To be very clear, it doesn't diagnose anything. Critics and psychologists would say it's a prop, an intimidation tool used to induce a kind of hypnotic state or create dependency on the process.
But the legal status of it is fascinating.
It is. The FDA actually raided the church in the 60s and seized the e-meters, claiming they were fraudulent medical devices being used to make unproven claims of curing illnesses.
So how did they get them back?
After a long legal battle, a court ruled they could use them, but only if they were clearly labeled as religious artifacts, not medical devices, and that the church made no claims of curing disease. So if you look at an e-meter today, it has a disclaimer right on it saying it is for religious use only.
It's amazing how the legal and the spiritual are so deeply intertwined here. Every step seems calculated to protect the organization. But I want to get to the stuff that you don't see on the brochures, the secret stuff, the space opera.
Ah, yes. This is where we get into the upper confidential levels of the bridge, specifically operating Thetan Level 3, or OT3.
This is the one they call the Wall of Fire.
That's what Hubbard called it. Now think about this. In most religions, the core myth, the story of creation or the fall of man or salvation, is the first thing you learn. It's taught to everyone openly.
Right, it's the foundation.
In Scientology, the core cosmology, the creation story, is treated like a trade secret. You are not allowed to know it until you have paid for and successfully completed all the levels leading up to OT3.
And they litigate like crazy to keep it secret.
Aggressively. They've sued people for copyright infringement for posting it online. But thanks to the internet and court leaks, primarily from a major case in the 80s, we have the documents. We know the story.
So tell us the story. What is the deal with Xenu?
According to Hubbard's handwritten materials for the OT3 course, the story begins 75 million years ago. At that time, there was a galactic confederacy of 76 planets, and it was suffering from a severe overpopulation problem.
Okay, an intergalactic government with a population crisis.
And the ruler of this confederacy was a being named Xenu.
Xenu.
Xenu, got it. Xenu decided to solve the overpopulation problem once and for all. He had his minions call in billions of citizens from across the confederacy for, supposedly, income tax inspections. But it was a trap.
A trap? What did you do?
He had them paralyzed, frozen in a mixture of alcohol and glycol, and then loaded them into spacecraft that Hubbard specifically describes as looking exactly like DC-8 airplanes but with rocket engines.
DC-8 space planes, 75 million years ago. That's a very specific detail.
Very specific. These space planes flew to Earth, which at the time was called TGAC, and Xenu's forces stacked these billions of frozen people around the bases of volcanoes across the planet, places like Hawaii and Las Palmas.
And
then he detonated hydrogen bombs inside the volcanoes.
he blew them all up.
He blew them all up. A mass genocide on a galactic scale.
Yeah.
But the explosion didn't destroy their souls, their Thetans. It just ripped them from their bodies. So now you have billions and billions of disembodied, traumatized Thetans floating around in Earth atmosphere.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. It sounds exactly like a pulp sci-fi novel from the 50s.
It's often been compared to one. But the story doesn't end there. Xenu's forces then captured all these floating souls using electronic ribbons or sticky traps. They were brought to huge cinemas where they were forced to watch movies for 36 days straight.
What kind of movies?
Movies that implanted them with all sorts of false data and confusing imagery. Hubbard called these implants. They included images of God, the devil, Christ, and the foundations of modern Earth religions. The idea was to confuse them so they could never figure out what truly happened. Then they were released.
So what does this ancient story have to do with us now? Why do I need to pay $100,000 to learn this?
This is the absolute crux of the upper OT levels. Hubbard taught that these traumatized, disembodied, brainwashed Thetans didn't just disappear, they clustered together.
Yeah.
And today, right now, they are attached to you. They're attached to me.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
called body Thetans.
I'm haunted. I'm infested with alien ghosts.
In a word, yes. The doctrine says that your persistent fears, your anxieties, your physical pains, your self-doubts are often not even yours. They are being caused by these body Thetans that are stuck to you, re-experiencing their own ancient trauma.
They're like spiritual parasites.
Exactly. And the entire purpose of the advanced OT levels, from OT3 up to OT7, is to telepathically locate these body Thetans, communicate with them, audit them through the trauma of the volcano explosion, and get them to leave your body.
Exorcism via telepathy for thousands and thousands of these things.
One by one or in clusters. It's a very long process.
But why keep this so incredibly secret? I mean, every religion has its myths. Why hide this one behind a firewall of litigation and non-disclosure agreements?
Hubbard's official warning was dire. He claimed in the course materials that if you learned this material before you were spiritually ready, before you had done all the prep work on the lower levels of the bridge, it would kill you.
It would kill you.
So he said you would get pneumonia and die. It was called the Wall of Fire because it was supposedly that dangerous to your physical body.
So it's a spiritual safety hazard.
That's the internal logic. From an external, it's much more pragmatic. If you told a brand new recruit on day one about Xenu and hydrogen bombs and alien ghosts, they'd laugh and walk right out the door.
Of course.
You have to be slowly acclimated to the belief system. It's the classic boiling frog method of indoctrination. By the time you finally reach OT third, you have already invested years of your life, countless hours of auditing, and maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. You were too invested to just walk away.
It really highlights that duality we talked about at the start. On the surface, it's all self-help, communication courses, study tech. But deep inside, it's an intergalactic war against body parasites from 75 million years ago.
And that duality extends to the very structure of the organization itself, because running this massive worldwide operation requires a massive dedicated workforce. And that brings us to the Sea Org.
The Sea Organization, these are the people you see in the naval-style uniforms, right?
Yes. They were established in 1967 when Hubbard decided to move his base of operations onto a small fleet of ships to avoid the jurisdiction of governments like the US, UK, and Australia, which were investigating him. He appointed himself the Commodore.
So it's a clergy, basically.
It's the elite inner core, the dedicated clergy. They're the ones who run the organization, deliver the upper levels, and manage the whole enterprise.
And they sign a contract. I remember reading about this. It's a very, very long contract.
It is the longest contract. They sign a 1 billion-year contract.
1 billion years.
Symbolizing their commitment to serve Scientology and its goals, not just in this lifetime, but in all of their future lifetimes as Thetans. It creates a total, all-encompassing identity. You aren't just a person working a job. You are an immortal being on a sacred mission to clear the planet.
That is heavy. And the lifestyle isn't exactly a Caribbean cruise, from what the sources say.
Far from it. The source material from former members describes it as an extremely high-pressure communal existence. Long, long hours, often 90 or 100 hours a week. Very little pay, sometimes just a stipend of $50 a week, and the discipline is intense.
Let's talk about that discipline, because this isn't just your boss telling you to try harder next time. This is a whole system. Management by statistics.
Right. Hubbard was obsessed with metrics and statistics. Every single post in the organization, from the person cleaning the floors to the top executives, has a stat that is plotted on a graph every week.
So what kind of stats are we talking about?
It could be number of new people brought in, value of books sold, or just gross income. If your graph is going up, you're up stat. You're in good standing. If the graph is going down, you're down stat, and you're in serious trouble.
Make money. Make more money. That's an actual directive found in Hubbard's policy letters.
It is. And if you are consistently down stat, or if you violate any of the myriad of rules, the consequences are severe. This brings us to the Rehabilitation Project Force, or the RPF.
The RPF. This is described by critics and numerous former members as essentially a prison camp.
That's the description they use. It's a disciplinary program for Sea Org members who have been deemed a problem. The sources describe conditions where members are stripped of their rank, made to wear black boiler suits, and engaged in hard physical labor all day.
And what else?
They're often housed in squalid conditions like a basement or a garage. They're separated from their families, forbidden from speaking to anyone unless spoken to, and forced to eat table scraps after everyone else has eaten. It's a process of total humiliation designed to break the individual's will and rebuild them in the image of the organization.
And this isn't just for low-level grunts who mess up. We're talking about high-ranking executives being sent there.
Absolutely. No one is safe from the ethics system. And the ultimate weapon in this system, the thing that keeps everyone in line, is the policy of disconnection.
This is the one that breaks families. We see it in the documentaries constantly. It's heartbreaking.
It is arguably the most powerful control mechanism they have. Hubbard defined a category of people he called suppressive persons, or SPs. He claimed that about 2.5% of the population are SPS people who are truly malevolent antisocial personalities, like Hitler or anyone who actively criticizes Scientology.
So if I leave the church and I decide to speak out about my experiences, I'm an SP.
You are immediately declared a suppressive person. And if you are declared an SP, a policy letter is issued, and any Scientologist in good standing, your spouse, your children, your parents, your best friends, must disconnect from you.
Meaning what, exactly?
They have to sever all ties, completely. No phone calls, no emails, no contact whatsoever. If they refuse, they are labeled a potential trouble source, or PTS, and they themselves risk being thrown out of the church.
It's a mechanism to keep people in. You can't leave without losing everyone and everything you love.
It effectively holds your entire family hostage. And it brings us to how the church deals with the outside world. Because if you think they are tough on their own members, just look at how they treat their enemies. We have to talk about fair game.
Fair game. The name alone sounds ominous.
It's a policy written by Hubbard in the 1960s. He wrote that an enemy of the church, an SP, may be deprived of property or injured by any means, by any Scientologist without any discipline of the Scientologist, may be tricked, sued, or lied to or destroyed.
Tricked, sued, or lied to, or destroyed. That's in writing from the founder.
It was. Now, the church will say they officially canceled this policy by name in 1968 because it was causing bad PR. But critics and countless former members allege that while the name might have changed, the practice continues unabated. They just don't call it fair game anymore.
And they point to some pretty extreme operations as proof. Like Operation Snow White. This is one of those things that if you put it in a movie, people would say it's too unrealistic.
It is the largest single instance of domestic espionage in the history of the United States. In the 1970s, the Guardian's Office, which was the intelligence and covert operations wing of the church, decided to purge government files in dozens of countries that were negative towards Hubbard and Scientology.
They didn't just hack in, they physically infiltrated the federal government.
They did.
Yeah.
Scientologists got jobs inside the IRS and the U.S. Justice Department. They worked as clerks, secretaries, assistants. They planted bugs in conference rooms, wiretapped phones, and stole tens of thousands of sensitive documents.
And they got caught.
They did. The FBI raided them in 1977, and it led to the conviction of 11 top Scientology officials, including Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's own wife. She went to prison.
That is just staggering. It shows the lengths they will go to. And then there was the operation against the journalist Paulette Cooper, Operation Freakout.
Paulette Cooper wrote one of the very first critical books, The Scandal of Scientology, in 1971. The church didn't just sue her. They launched a multi-year campaign to utterly destroy her life, which they codenamed Operation Freakout.
And the goal.
The stated goal, in their own internal documents, which were seized by the FBI, was to get her incarcerated in a mental institution or jail.
How did they try to do that?
It's insane. They stole her personal stationery. They used it to write and mail fake bomb threats to the Church of Scientology itself, and even one to Henry Kissinger, trying to frame her as a terrorist. She was actually indicted by a grand jury before the FBI discovered the plot during the Snow White raids and realized she'd been framed.
That is terrifying. It's institutional gaslighting on a federal level.
It shows that the organization, at its core, views itself as being at war with a hostile world. Hubbard viewed the universe as a battleground between the forces of Scientology and the forces of suppression. And in a war, anything goes.
This war mentality seems to extend to the legal system, too. The phrase litigiousness comes up constantly in the sources when describing their tactics.
Hubbard famously wrote in a policy letter, "The purpose of the suit is to harass and discourage rather than to win." He advised using lawsuits as a tool. You sue critics, not necessarily because you think you can win, but to bleed them dry, to make it so expensive and so psychologically draining to criticize Scientology that people will just stop doing it.
And they use this tactic to essentially destroy the original cult awareness network.
They did. The original CAN was a nonprofit that had families of people in groups they considered cults. Scientology and its members filed dozens of lawsuits against them until CAN was forced into bankruptcy.
And then,
in the most incredible twist of irony, a Scientologist bought the name, the logo, and the phone number of the Cult Awareness Network in the bankruptcy auction. So now, if you Google the Cult Awareness Network for help, you are calling a group backed by the Church of Scientology.
That is strategic genius in a very, very dark way.
It is ruthlessly efficient.
We've talked a lot about the history and the attacks on external critics, but we have to address the allegations of abuse inside the organization, especially in more recent years. Hubbard died in 1986. Who took over?
A man named David Miscavige. He was a very young, very intense Sea Org member who rose through the ranks and seized power in the vacuum that Hubbard's death created. Under his leadership, the organization became even more focused on expansion and acquiring real estate. But the reports of abuse also intensified.
And this is where we start hearing about something called the Hole.
Yes. According to testimony from multiple high-ranking executives who later left, the Hole was a confinement facility at Gold Base, the international headquarters in California. They described being confined in a pair of double-wide trailers, basically an office building, for months and in some cases years.
Confinement?
They alleged they were subjected to group confessions, forced to perform humiliating tasks, and that there was physical violence. beatings, people being slammed against walls.
I recall reading about a game of musical chairs.
That's one of the most bizarre and disturbing details to come out. Allegedly, Miscavige ordered these top executives, people who had been in it for decades, to play musical chairs to the sound of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Why?
They were told that the last person standing would be the only one allowed to stay at the base. Everyone else would be kicked out of the Sea Org, which for them meant losing their entire world, their families, everything. They were literally fighting for their lives over a chair.
And what is the church's response to these allegations?
They deny it completely, vehemently. They say the whole never existed as described, and that these are all lies from disgruntled former members, they call them apostates, who have an axe to grind and are looking for a payday. But the consistency of the stories from so many different high-level people is what observers find so compelling.
And this isn't the only serious allegation. There's a tragic case of Lisa McPherson.
That's a landmark case. Lisa McPherson was a dedicated Scientologist who died in 1995. She had a mental breakdown after a minor car accident. But because Scientology is so opposed to psychiatry, instead of getting professional mental health care, she was taken to the Fort Harrison Hotel in Clearwater, Florida, to undergo the introspection rundown.
Which is what, exactly?
It's a Scientology process designed to handle a psychotic break.
Yeah.
It involves complete isolation and silence. She was held there for 17 days.
And she died in their care.
She died of a pulmonary embolism. The coroner's report said she was severely dehydrated, had cockroach bites, and was in a state of neglect. The state of Florida brought 2 felony charges against the church abuse of a disabled adult and practicing medicine without a license. But the case was eventually dropped due to controversies with the medical examiners changing opinions.
But it led to a lawsuit.
A massive wrongful death lawsuit from her family, which the church eventually settled confidentially. It remains a powerful rallying cry for critics about the dangers of rejecting conventional medicine.
And then there are all the allegations regarding women and children. The forced abortion claims from former Sea Org members are particularly disturbing.
They are. Multiple women who were in the Sea Org for years, people like Astra Woodcraft and Claire Headley, who have spoken out publicly, allege that because the Sea Org is a paramilitary-style group focused 247 on clearing the planet, having children was viewed as a major distraction, a liability.
So they claim.
They claim they were pressured, coerced, and essentially forced into having abortions to keep their posts.
To keep their jobs.
To keep their standing in the only world they knew. They alleged that if they refused, they faced being sent to lower-level organizations, being declared a problem, or being kicked out entirely, which meant losing their spouse and their life's work.
That's the church's response.
Again, they deny this completely. They say they have a profound respect for family and that these decisions were personal choices.
Huh.
But the sheer volume of corroborating testimonies from different women over many years creates a very, very dark picture.
It really paints a picture of an organization where the so-called mission overrides basic human rights and family bonds.
That's the greater good argument taken to its absolute extreme.
Yeah.
If you truly believe you are the only hope for the survival of the universe, then individual suffering can become acceptable, even necessary collateral damage.
Which brings us back to how they view the rest of society, specifically their absolute hatred of psychiatry. It's not just a dislike. The sources describe it as an all-out war.
It was a total war. Hubbard despised psychiatrists. He called them psychs. He blamed them for pretty much every evil in modern society. He claimed they were responsible for the Holocaust, for creating drug abuse, for political suppression. He viewed psychiatry as a rival priesthood. They were competing for the same territory, the human mind.
So they formed the CCHR.
The Citizens Commission on Human Rights. It sounds like a generic, laudable rights group, but it's a Scientology-front organization founded in 1969 with the sole purpose of dismantling the entire field of psychiatry.
And they're still active today.
They're very active. They have a museum in Hollywood called Psychiatry, an industry of death. They aggressively lobby against antidepressants, ADHD medication, and mental health legislation around the world.
And speaking of front groups, we have to talk about recruitment, because people don't usually walk in off the street and say, sign me up for the alien ghosts and the billion-year contract.
No, the gradient is key. You start small. You might see a tent on the sidewalk offering a free stress test. You sit down, hold the cans of the e-meter, they ask you some questions, and then tell you that you have areas of stress and ruin in your life that they can help you with.
So it starts with a simple personality test.
Or maybe you encounter Narconon, their drug rehab program.
Narconon is Scientology.
It is based entirely on Hubbard's non-medical writings. It uses something called the purification rundown. long hours in a sauna, combined with massive doses of vitamins, supposedly to sweat out drug toxins. Critics, including medical professionals, argue it lacks any scientific backing and is primarily a recruitment tool that funnels vulnerable people into the church.
And then, of course, there's the celebrity strategy. Project Celebrity.
This goes all the way back to a 1955 policy letter from Hubbard. He knew that famous people are trendsetters. If you get the influencers, you get the public. So they created celebrity centers specifically to cater to artists and famous people.
And it worked.
It worked brilliantly. Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Elizabeth Moss, Nancy Cartwright, they are the smiling, successful face of the organization. They make it look safe, desirable, and elite.
But something happened in the mid-2000s that they couldn't control. A new enemy emerged. The internet.
The internet was the one thing Hubbard couldn't possibly have predicted, and it completely changed the game. In 2008, an internal Scientology video of Tom Cruise, meant only for other members, was leaked to the web.
I remember this. He's very intense in it.
Very intense. He has these wide eyes, and he's talking about how Scientologists are the authorities on the mind and the only ones who can really help. The church tried to scrub it from the web, issuing copyright takedown notices everywhere.
And the internet fought back.
Enter Anonymous, the loosely organized hacktivist collective. They saw this censorship attempt as an attack on the freedom of the internet. They declared war on the Church of Scientology and launched Project Genealogy.
What did that involve?
It started with cyber attacks, DDoS attacks, that took down Scientology websites. Then it moved to prank calls and black faxes. And then it moved into the real world. Thousands of people, all wearing Guy Fawkes masks from the movie V for Vendetta, began holding protests outside Scientology orgs all over the world.
That was a huge turning point, wasn't it?
It was monumental. Before that, fear of litigation kept most people silent. Anonymous was, well, anonymous. They couldn't be easily sued into silence. They broke the fear barrier.
Then that opened the floodgates.
It led to a new wave of ex-members feeling safe enough to speak out. It paved the way for major documentaries like HBO's Going Clear and Leah Remini's TV show. It completely changed the public narrative and took away the church's ability to control information.
So where does that leave us today? We still have these two versions of Scientology fighting it out.
We do. On one hand, you have the Scientology that is presented to the public, a humanitarian organization, a group that is officially recognized as a tax-exempt religion in the United States.
A status they won in 1993 after what the sources describe as a war with the IRS.
An all-out war. They filed, I believe, something like 2,400 lawsuits against the IRS until the agency finally capitulated and granted them the exemption. So legally, in the U.S., they are a bona fide religion.
But not everywhere.
Not everywhere. In France, the organization has been convicted of organized fraud. In Germany, it's monitored by intelligence agencies as an anti-democratic cult. In Australia, it was banned in the 60s, then later recognized as a religion. The legal status depends entirely on where you are standing.
And meanwhile, the organization is incredibly wealthy.
Billions of dollars in real estate. Under Miscavige, they've focused on buying historic buildings in cities around the world and renovating them into lavish ideal orgs. But reports from journalists and ex-members suggest that these massive, beautiful buildings are largely empty.
So they have the money and the property, but they are losing the people.
It seems that way. The internet has inoculated the public. If you Google Scientology today, the first thing you find isn't a free personality test. The first thing you find is the whole, you find Xenu, you find disconnection, and you find fair game.
It brings us right back to the beginning, to a synthesis. We've looked at the sci-fi origins, the promise of a talk therapy, the secret space opera theology, the intense systems of control, and the constant war with critics.
And it creates a fascinating final question for you, the listener. L. Ron Hubbard wrote in one of his technical bulletins that the only way to control people is to lie to them.
And yet, in other places, he claimed to be creating a brand new civilization, a world where honest beings can have rights.
That is the core contradiction, isn't it?
So which version of Hubbard won? The humanitarian visionary or the cynical manipulator?
That's the question. Has the organization he created ultimately served that vision of spiritual freedom he promised? Or has it become the very thing it claimed to fight? A mechanism of suppression. The sources we've examined suggest that for many, it began as a dream of freedom and ended as a prison of belief.
And for you listening, it makes you think, where is that line? At what point does a high-demand religion with unorthodox beliefs become what its critics call a thriving cult? That is something to mull over.
Indeed.
And as always, remember, check your sources. Because in a world of information warfare, the deep dive into knowledge is your only real defense against manipulation.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's it for this deep dive into the source material on Scientology. We will see you next time.